Okay, ready? Redwall. We're in part 1, chapter 13. Now remember, Ambrose Spike the hedgehog had gone on a scouting party and he came back very badly injured. And Clooney the rat has decided, the bad guy, he has decided that he's sending one of his soldiers in to sneak and take an important part of their tapestry. So they'll be so discouraged they'll give in. Psychological warfare. But anyway, so chapter 13. The sun's first rays flung wide the gates of dawn. The inhabitants of Redwall were already up and about. After breakfast, the abbot issued daily orders. All those not employed defending the abbey would husband the crops and gather in supplies for the larders in the event of a prolonged siege. That means they have to stay inside the walls. They can't go out. Young otters collected watercress and fished. Cornflower headed a party of mice to reap the early cereal crops. More youngsters tended the salad gardens. The bright summer morning hummed to the bustle of industrious woodlanders. Ambrose Spike, now sufficiently recovered, sat in the storeroom taking stock. Lots of nuts and preserved berries from last autumn, apples and pears aplenty. Unfortunately, the hedgehog could not check the cellars. Brother Edmund and Friar Hugo had on the only two keys. He licked his lips at the thought of barrels of nut brown ale, strong cider, creamy stout, and the little kegs. Ah, the dear little kegs, full of elderberry wine, mulberry brandy, blackcurrant port, and wild grape sherry. "You're a hedgepig, William's putting these roots and dandelions. Listen up, damn right, Abbey." Ambrose sighed wistfully as he attended the two moles staggering under a bundle of dandelions and tubers. "Our old little tater's ready, Bill. You tip 'em up, Lego." More baby moles. Ambrose pawed the bandage on his wound. A hedgehog's work was never done. Matthias and Constance stood in the cloisters. They had taken charge of weapons training. The Woodlanders were each showing off their special skills. In more peaceful days, these skills had only been used at fairs and sporting contests, but now, when the need arose, they would be used to more deadly effort. The otters carried bags of smooth pebbles, which they hurled from vine slings with great force and accuracy. Groups of field mouse archers knocked thistledown shafts to the strings of their longbows. Many a marauding bird had been driven off by these same tiny archers. Bands of Redwall mice practiced at thrust and parry with staves. Below the wall on the abbey grass, the foreman directed his crew as they dug a trench. This was lined with sharpened stakes by a solitary beaver. A system of ropes and pulleys carried the baskets of stone and trench debris up the ramparts. Defenders piled it in heaps at the edge of the parapet. Matthias took a group of Redwall mice to instruct in the use of the quarterstaff. He had discovered in himself a natural skill with a long ash pole. None of the mice had ever competed in any type of violent sport. They were awkward and timid, but as it was a personal choice between learning cudgel and wrestling from Constance or quarterstaff from Matthias to a mouse, they opted for the latter. That means they don't want to fight Constance or even practice against her. Constance found he had to be quite severe with them. Accordingly, he dealt some hefty blows and hard falls to make the more timid souls angry enough to retaliate. "Keep that head guarded, Brother Antony." Thwack! "I warned you, brother. Now look out. I'm coming after you again." Thwack! "No, no. Don't just stand there, brother. Defend yourself. Hit out at me." Thwack! Crack! This time Matthias sat down hard, rubbing dazedly at his sore head, and Constance chuckled. Well, Matthias, you've only yourself to blame. You asked Brother Anthony to hit out at you, and my word, he's certainly obliged. I'll have to recruit him for my cudgel class. He shows promise. Matthias stood up, smiling ruefully. He rested on his staff. Yes, he's very strong, but I do wish that we had some real weapons of war, swords and daggers and such like. We won't kill many rats with wooden staves. Maybe not, the badger replied, but you must remember that we are here to defend, not to attack or kill. Matthias threw down his staff. He took a dipper of water from an oaken pail, drinking deeply, then splashing the remains over his aching head. A wise observation, Constance, but you try telling that to Clooney and his hordes. See how far you get. Lunch that day was served out in the orchard. Matthias lined up with the other woodland creatures to collect his food: a bowl of fresh milk, a hunk of wheaten loaf, and some goat's milk cheese. Cornflower was serving. She gave Matthias an extra large wedge of cheese. He rolled up the sleeve of his habit and pulled out the corner of her scarf. Look, Cornflower, a very close friend gave me this last night. She laughed at him. Get along and eat your lunch, Warrior Mouse, or I'll show you my deadly aim with a piece of this cheese. Strolling through the dappled shade of the orchard, Matthias sought out old Methuselah. Slumping down beneath a damson tree, the young mouse munched away at his lunch. Methuselah was sitting with his back against the tree, his eyes closed in an apparent doze. Without opening them, he addressed Matthias. How goes the practice war, young stave master? Matthias watched some of the tiny ants carrying off his fallen breadcrumbs as he answered, As well as possible, brother Methuselah. And how are your studies coming along? Methuselah squinted over the top of his spectacles. Knowledge is a thing that one cannot have enough of. It is the fruit of wisdom to be eaten carefully and digested fully, unlike that lunch you are bolting down, little friend. He's eating too fast. Matthias set his food to one side. Tell me, what knowledge have you digested lately, old one? Methuselah took a sip from Matthias's milk bowl. Sometimes I think you have a very old head for such a young mouse. What more do you wish to know about Martin the warrior? Matthias looked surprised. How did you know I was going to ask about Martin? Methuselah wrinkled his nose. How do the bee folk know there is pollen in a flower? Ask away, young one, before I doze off again. Matthias hesitated a moment and then blurted out, Brother Methuselah, tell me where Martin lies buried. The old mouse chuckled dryly. Next, you're going to ask me where to find the great sword of the warrior mouse. But how did you know that? Stammered Matthias. The ancient gatekeeper shrugged his thin shoulders. The sword must lie buried with Martin. You would have had little use for the dusty bones of a bygone hero. A simple deduction, then, even for one as old as I am. Then you know where the warrior lies? Methuselah shook his head. That is a thing no creature knows. For many long years now I have puzzled and pored over ancient manuscripts, translating, following hidden trails, always with the same result: nothing. I have even used my gift of tongue, speaking to the bees and others who can go into places too small for us, but always it is the same: rumors, legends, and old mouse tales. Matthias crumbled more bread for the ants. Then the warrior's sword is only a fable? Methuselah leaned forward indignantly. Who said that? Did I? No, but you. Bah! Nothing of the sort, young mouse. Listen carefully to me. I have an uncanny feeling that you may be the one I have been saving this vital piece of information for. Matthias forgot his lunch. He listened attentively. About 4 summers ago, I treated a sparrowhawk who had pulled a sinew in her foot. She could not use her talons properly. As I remember, I made her promise never to take a mouse as a prey. She was a fierce, frightening bird. Have you ever been up close to a sparrowhawk? No, of course you haven't. Well, let me tell you, they can hypnotize small creatures with those savage golden eyes. Born killers, they are. But this hawk said something that made me think. She talked to the sparrows, called them winged mice, and said that many years ago they had stolen something from our Abbey, a treasure that belonged to the mice. Wouldn't say what it was, just flew off. Huh, who expects gratitude from a sparrowhawk anyway? Matthias interrupted. Have you spoken to the sparrows about this something? Methuselah shook his head. I'm too old. I can't climb up to the roof where they nest. Besides, the sparrows are odd birds, forever quarreling and chattering on in their strange voices. They are warlike creatures, extremely forgetful and completely savage. They'd throw you from the roof and kill you before you had a chance to get near their tribal nests. Yes, I'm far too old for that sort of thing, Matthias, and anyhow, I'm not too sure that the sparrowhawk's story was true. Some birds can be dreadful liars when they have a mind to be. Matthias tried questioning Brother Methuselah further, but the warm sun had worked its magic on the old gatekeeper as he sat in the orchard savoring the peace and tranquility of a June afternoon. This time there was no deception. He was genuinely fast asleep. Okay, let's see now. Chapter 14. I think we've got enough time. Okay, chapter 14. Clouds drifted across the sky, obscuring the thin silver of the moon. The Joseph bell tolled its midnight message to the slumbering countryside. A warm, soft drizzle was falling over the parched meadows and dry woodland, bringing relief after the hot, dry day, damping down the dust from the road. In the ditch, a frog opened its eyes, disturbed by some slight noise from the hedgerow. It blinked. Was that 3 figures creeping along? Or 2? The frog remained perfectly still. There seemed to be 2 figures in some sort of shadow. The moon came out from behind a cloud. It was 2 huge rats and a dark, shadowy something. They crept along under cover of the hedge towards the big dwelling of the mouse folk. Rats were hunters. Thankfully, they had not noticed him. The frog stayed motionless and let them pass. It was none of his business. Clooney, Ragear, and Shadow padded noiselessly towards Redwall. This was such an important mission that Clooney had decided to come along and supervise it personally. Around Shadow's waist was strapped a skin pouch. It contained a thin, strong rope, a padded grappling hook, a vial of oil, some lockpicks, and a dagger. Shadow's usual burgling kit. Ragear ambled proudly along, thrilled that he had been specially picked to accompany his chief on such a vital task. Little did he know that Clooney had only included him as insurance. If they should get into a tight corner, Ragear would serve as an expendable fool. That way, Clooney could make good his own escape. The trio halted beneath the lofty Abbey walls. Clooney silenced them with a wave of his tail, then vanished into the night. Ragear felt distinctly nervous at being left alone with the shadow. He attempted a whispered conversation. Nice drops of rain, eh, Shadow? Good for the grass. Blow me, those walls are pretty high. I'm glad it's you climbing them and not me. I'd never make it. Too fat. Ragear's voice trailed off. He fumbled with his whiskers, wilting beneath the basilisk stare of Shadow's deep or dead black eyes. He shuddered and fell silent. Within 10 minutes, Clooney was back. He nodded at the parapet. I've been up and down the length of the wall for a fair distance. The sentry mice are all asleep, the fools. They've never had to do guard duty before. As soon as night falls, so do their eyelids. That's what soft living does for you. Ragear's head bobbed in agreement. You're right, Chief. If they were in our army and old Redtooth caught them snoozing, he'd shut your trap, stupid, Clooney hissed. Are you ready, Shadow? Now, don't forget your instructions." The shadow bared his yellowed fangs and started climbing. Slowly, he made his way upwards like a long black reptile, his claws seeking hidden niches and crevices in the sandstone. Ever upwards, sometimes stopping spread eagled against the surface as he figured out his next movement, taking full advantage of every crack and joint in the wall. No other animal in Clooney's army could have attempted such an ascent. But the shadow was a climbing expert. He concentrated his whole being on the job in hand, sometimes clinging to the stones by no more than a single claw. Below on the ground, Clooney and Ragier strained their eyes upwards. They could hardly make out his shape, but could just see him not far from the top of the wall. The shadow shifted position and levered back with his back legs and tail. Now he wedged his claws into a fissure and stretched upward, gaining inch by inch. On top of the wall, Brother Edmund was snoring gently. He was nestled in a pile of rubble, wrapped in a warm blanket with his hood up against the light rain. Edmund was oblivious of the long, sharp claws that lashed themselves over the parapet edge. A moment later, the sleek, black head appeared. Two dense, obsidian eyes stared at the sleeping mouse. The shadow had succeeded in climbing the Abbey wall. Like a sinuous black lizard, he slithered past the slumbering creatures and around rubble heaps, never once making a sound. Friar Hugo mumbled gently in his sleep and moved his head so that his cowl slid off. Drizzle fell on the fat friar's face, threatening to wake him. Gently, as a night breeze, Shadow replaced the hood. Pausing for an instant, Shadow looked about before descending the stone steps from the ramparts to the cloisters. Using shrubs and bushes as cover, he moved furtively forwards, never taking any needless chances or making any sudden movements. Sometimes he stopped and waited, letting the moments tick away as he planned his next progression, gliding like a cloud's shadow cast upon the grounds by the moon. The door to the great hall was not locked. Shadow judged that the latch was probably old and creaky. He took out the vial of oil and lubricated the latch and hinges. Carefully, he inched the door ajar. Apart from a tiny squeak, it swung effortlessly open. Sliding inside, he released the door by mistake. A swift night breeze slammed it shut with a dull thud. Shadow cursed inwardly and flung himself behind a nearby pillar. He lay inert, not daring to breathe. 1, 2, 3 minutes. Good. Nobody had been disturbed by the noise. He ventured out to inspect the tapestry that hung upon the wall. A black moth on a moonless night would not have escaped Shadow's notice. He needed no lamp to scrutinize the thing before him. So this was the picture of the warrior mouse that Clooney lusted after. Using his razor-sharp fangs, he began gnawing into the ancient tapestry, working from the tasseled hem upwards. Matthias tossed and turned in his sleep, exhausted but unable to sleep. His mind revolved around a host of problems and schemes: the sword, Martin's grave, defense of the Abbey, cornflower. Finally, after much kicking and rumpling of sheets, sleep started to take over. He was somewhere in a long, deserted room, not unlike the great hall. A voice called to him, "Matthias!" "Oh, go away," the young mouse muttered drowsily. "Get someone else. I'm tired." But the voice persisted, boring into his mind. "Matthias! Matthias! I need you!" He peered down the length of the darkened hall. "What is it? Why do you need me?" Matthias began to walk towards the voice. He could hear a wicked snigger followed by a cry of despair. "Matthias, help! Don't let them take me!" He ran forward. The hall seemed to grow longer. "Who are you? Where are you?" Far ahead in the murky darkness, Matthias could vaguely distinguish a figure leaning out from the wall. It was a mouse in armor. Please, Matthias, you must help me quickly. Bump. Matthias landed on the floor of his bedroom. Sheets were tangled about his body. Slowly he sat up and rubbed his eyes. What a strange dream! The long hall, the plea for help, the armored mouse. Matthias felt the fur on the back of his neck rising. Of course, it had to be. The great hall, Martin the warrior. Something terrible was going on downstairs. He was needed urgently. Matthias kicked the sheets from him as he leaped up and dashed headlong from the bedroom, along the dormitory corridor, and helter-skelter down the spiral staircase. Through a cavern hole, he clattered in the darkness, stumbling and tripping over furniture, but his heart hammering loudly and legs pumping like twin pistons. Matthias fell over the top stair and went sprawling into the great hall. He lay on the floor, gazing through the gloom to the tapestry. Martin was still there, but he was moving. Was it a breeze? No, it couldn't be. The likeness of the warrior mouse was jigging about as though it were being triggered or tugged in some way. Matthias could see a shadow, but there was nothing to cast it. He jumped to his feet and ran forward as the picture of Martin was ripped away from the tapestry. A rat held it! There was no doubt in Matthias's mind. It was a rat, entirely black from tip to tail, barely distinguishable from the night itself. Shadow heard the footsteps on the floor behind him. With cold, calculated detachment, he wheeled about as his opponent charged. He was certain to defeat such a small creature in combat, but his orders were to get the picture, not to fight little mice. Besides, there was always the additional hazard that the mouse might hang on to him and shout for help until it came. Like a wraith of oily smoke, Shadow completed a clever double maneuver. Bowling his body into a forward roll, he knocked Matthias down like a skittle. Bounding up, he slipped around the door, slammed it, and fled off through the cloisters. Matthias sprang up, roaring at the top of his voice, Stop that rat! Stop that rat! Immediately, the mice on sentry duty were alerted. As the shadow ran, he saw Constance dash across the grounds at an angle which cut him off from the stairs up to the ramparts. Switching directions, he made for the next set of stairs, silently cursing the badger. Now he would have to use his climbing rope to descend quickly to the road. Matthias emerged from the Abbey. He saw Shadow change directions. Thinking fast, he ran diagonally, catching up with the thief at the foot of the stairs. Throwing himself in a flying tackle, Matthias grabbed the Shadow by the legs, sending him crashing onto the lower steps. Still clinging to the tapestry, the Shadow wriggled like an eel. Turning over on his back, he kicked savagely at the young mouse's head with a free foot. Matthias tried valiantly to hang on, but his larger and heavier opponent kicked him viciously in the face again and again and again. The big bony foot, with its sharp claws pounding and gouging away, soon took its toll. Matthias went limp and blacked out. Constance had mounted the far steps. Gaining the rampart, she ran along, dodging the heaps of rubble. She saw Matthias go down under the onslaught of kicks and ran even faster, impeded by mice all around who scattered in panic, thinking they were under mass invasion. The only one besides Constance who had the sense to see what was happening was Cornflower's father. Being nearer the top of the stairs than the badger, he ran straight into the intruder. Shadow was struggling to get out his climbing rope. Surrender, rat! I've got you, cried Mr. Field Mouse as he grabbed hold of the thief. But, rummaging in his pouch to free the rope, Shadow's claw had closed on the handle of his dagger. He drew it out swiftly and drove it twice into the field mouse's unprotected body. Constance arrived just as the victim fell wounded. Shadow turned on her with the dagger raised. Constance swung her paw around in a mighty arc, and it caught Shadow square on the chin. The force of the blow lifted the thief clean off his feet, and before Constance could grab hold of him, He overbalanced and hurled over the edge of the parapet with a horrible scream. Downwards he plunged, his body thudding off the unyielding masonry. He landed in the wet roadway with a sickening crunch. Clooney came dashing towards the stricken Shadow, with Ragier scuttling in his wake. Despite his appalling injuries, Shadow managed to lever himself up on one paw. "Clooney, I'm hurt. Help me," he gasped. The piece of tapestry lay on the road. Clooney snatched it up eagerly. Behind them, he could hear the gatehouse bolts being withdrawn and amid the shouts of angry mice. Ruthlessly, he kicked at Shadow's broken body. "Get up and run for it, or stay here, fool. I don't carry cripples or burglars." Leaving the injured Shadow to the mice, Clooney sped off across the road. He covered the width of the ditch with a mighty leap and ran off across the meadows. In open country, he could outdistance any mouse that dared to follow him. Waving the tapestry, Clooney laughed in exhilaration as he put on an extra burst of speed. Ragier had panicked completely. He could not jump the ditch, so he scuttled off down the road in the opposite direction from the way they had come. A group of mice, led by Brother Alf, tried fording the ditch and climbing up into the meadow. Unfortunately, the rain had made the going hard and slippery. Clooney was long gone, and the tapestry with him. Turning back to Redwall, the pursuers came upon Matthias. He was leaning on Friar Hugo's arm in a dazed condition. Painfully, he staggered up the road to where the Shadow lay. Wincing, he cast about, searching the muddy roadway for the fragment of tapestry. "It's got to be here somewhere," cried Matthias. He fell upon the injured Shadow, searching his waist pouch. His flat black eyes clouding over, the Shadow watched Matthias. Laconically he spoke. His voice was strangely calm. "Too late, Mouse. Martin is with Clooney now." That was the last thing that Shadow ever said. He gave one final shudder and lay dead. Okay, until next time.